Hi there, welcome to the very first Building Your Creative Community workshop. Building a Creative Community is a new series of workshops co-presented by Happy Mag and the City of Sydney, and it's aimed at helping the youth of Sydney build successful music communities. So today we're going to be talking about networking and collaborating, sort of a very basic overview of how to meet people in your local music scene, how to interact with them, how to foster that scene, and also how to work with other local creatives such as directors, photographers, anyone else who will play an important part in your budding music career. So a quick introduction, I'm Tom Cameron, I'm the music editor at Happy Mag.
And I'm Claudia Schmidt, I'm the news editor at Happy Mag.
And also today we have Dan Shaw, who is the editor at Enmore Audio, who's our music tech publication. He will be answering any questions that you might have today, so any questions that you have about the workshop, just drop them into the comments. We'll be answering them live, so like I said, just drop your questions into the comments and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. And also later today, we're going to be joined by Joshua White, who is the label manager of Sydney indie label Third Eye Stimuli. He's going to be answering a few questions about fostering a community as a label. Cool. So jumping right into things, thanks for joining. We're going to sort of just start with a very basic overview of networking and what that means, because I think networking is it's a term that goes thrown around a lot in business and more corporate areas, and maybe not in the music scene as much. In the music scene, networking is something that happens quite naturally, just because of how many touch points you have for meeting people. So what does networking mean to musicians? The very basic answer is that it is the way of getting out there and meeting people. Like I said, as a musician, this happens very naturally. And so if I ask Claudia, where is the best place to network as a musician, what would you say?
Gigs.
Yeah, absolutely. So gigs are your number one touch point that you're going to be meeting people. And this can be your own gig or someone else's gig. Your own gig is obviously an opportunity to meet anyone from, fans, obviously, to the other bands that are playing the gig, to potential management, to anyone who's interested in yourself and because they're showing up at your gig. But then also other people's gigs. Like I would personally know a lot of bands who have come out of meeting each other at, a gig that they went to that was maybe a bit of a bigger artist, or they see themselves at a lot of different local gigs. They sort of strike up a friendship from there and realize that they both play music. Is that how it worked for you?
Yeah,
generally?
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Especially going to local gigs. Going out, especially to local gigs, you meet, it's a really easy way to meet people, and you see the same people going all the time, and it's, often you'll get a really great sense of community and network between people supporting each other, and you'll meet someone here and they'll introduce you to their friend in that band, and I think going out and supporting your friends' bands is really important. And also, on the other hand, when it's your gig, making sure you see all the other bands on the bill is a great way to also meet them afterwards and then chat. I think they're all really great ways to meet other musicians.
Yeah, I think we're going to keep coming back to being supportive of one another in this workshop a lot, because being supportive to the other people in your scene and your local community is hugely important, and it goes a long way. If you're playing a gig with other people, show up for the start of the gig. Don't just come for your show and then leave afterwards. You want to ideally be staying the whole time. You want to be seeing every band play. And not even necessarily if you're meeting them, but every band that you play a show with is potentially a band that you're going to play a show with again, or maybe even collaborate with. And if you're not sticking around and seeing the other sets, then you might miss out on a band that you are potentially going to work with in the future.
Yeah, it might be your next favourite band. You never know.
Yeah, or just a band you really love, which is another very important point of being in a music community. Outside of gigs though, there are a few other places that are pretty important. One, and these are everything from meeting other musicians and also meeting industry. which is less the purpose of this workshop, but I think it still bears mentioning. So community events such as local festivals and workshops. This workshop would not be online if we were doing it outside of the time of coronavirus restrictions. Some really great organisations like Music New South Wales and FBI Radio and the City of Sydney do a lot of youth-focused music workshops or arts workshops or any workshops sort of based on a local community. Have you ever gone to any of those?
Another one I was going to say was APRA.
Yeah.
Do some APRA and Music New South Wales do some awesome workshops, and they're on quite frequently. I've been to like a Women in Music workshop that they did, which was really amazing, or maybe it was Women in Electronic Music, can't remember now. And yeah, a bunch of other ones, networking workshops. And not only are they informative, but of course you get to meet everyone else there, often people in other bands, but also you get to meet, there's always some industry people there who are talking, be it managers or radio presenters or whatever, and it's a really great place to meet them, where it's this kind of like low pressure environment and everyone's really open to chatting. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, couldn't have said it better myself actually. Another sort of low pressure environment is I guess you'd call it sort of the local festival scene, which are generically free festivals that occur and that are maybe more on a community level than, you know, the big festivals that are ticketed. Things like Newtown Festival or Youth Fest, when people can do live events, are great ways to see a couple of new bands that are sort of probably in that same level of starting out as you, and also engaging with these organisations like APRA, Music New South Wales, City of Sydney. The local one to us in Newtown is the Newtown Neighbourhood Centre. They all do their part in fostering the local music community, and so turning up at those events, seeing those bands, and look, maybe you'll get the chance to play the next one as well if you show up and sort of ask a few questions and meet a few people. And the last one is a big one, but it bears mentioning, but it's maybe a bit more down the track for a lot of people, which is showcases. So there are things like Big Sound and the Australian Music Week that as a performer you'll have to be invited to play, but that doesn't strictly mean that you can't go. So a lot of people go to Big Sound. So Big Sound, just in case you haven't heard of it, is sort of the big Australian emerging music conference. It's kind of like South by Southwest, if you've heard of that, for Australia. And it is a place every year in Brisbane that 150 emerging bands play at, and it is where all of the industry is in one place. Every label manager, every tour manager, every booker, venue booker, everyone is looking at these new artists as the next wave. You do need to be invited to play Big Sound, but you can also buy a ticket. And Big Sound's not the only one in New South Wales. There's also the Australian Music Week down in Cronulla, which is great. Have you ever played any of those showcases?
Yeah, I've played both of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're really awesome. I think there's Melbourne Music Week as well, which I haven't played. But just on that point, even though you have to be invited to play at Big Sound, you, and I think AMW as well, you still apply. So anyone can apply, and then they select people. So, you know, always put your applications in, because you never know, you might get picked and then you'll get a chance to showcase. And yeah, even if you don't, you know, so many friends of mine have gone up and even, you know, booked gigs in the surrounding areas. Big Sound is in Fortitude Valley, and there's so many venues in that small area. And a local record label, Dinosaur City, I remember one year they went up and they just like booked their own venue and put on their own unofficial showcase, and I went and it was packed. And even though it wasn't like exactly on the Big Sound lineup, the Big Sound program, you know, everyone went along, and it was really awesome. So I guess that's another, if you don't get invited to play at the showcases, you can always suss out if there's anything unofficial going on, which you can jump on. And even if not that, you can just go up, and it's such a great chance to meet people and watch bands and yeah, network.
Definitely. A few general points on everything we've just talked about. I'd say obviously there's nothing wrong with getting your name out there, but there is a limit, and you do need to be a bit kind of aware of the people you're talking to in that way. So for instance, if you are a solo electronic act, for instance, you don't want to be hounding a label that exclusively signs punk bands, you know. Getting your name out there is great, and establishing strong connections is great, but the really meaningful ones are going to be the people who you gel with the most, and sort of don't try to bludgeon your way in relationships that may not necessarily be the best for your career.
Yeah, definitely. And I think on that point, like maybe more related to industry, but you know, if you're meeting industry people, try not to be like, hey, this is my band, we're great. Like, you know, it's always important to try and, you know, find level ground, build a friendship, and you know, actually make a relationship with people rather than just trying to you know, promote your band or whatever straight away. So always make sure to have a conversation, and yeah.
And every time that you have one of these conversations, it might sound a bit dumb, but follow it up the next day, follow it up the next week. Just reconnect with that person. Say, hey, I'm that person that you met. This is my band. It was awesome to meet you. A lot of people, and especially once you start approaching the industry side, if you're approaching media, if you're approaching radio personnel, if you're approaching labels, they are, as a rule, pretty inundated with emerging artists who want to get their ear, or who want to take a bit of time to, you know, learn something from them. So following up those connections is really great. You want to make yourself stand out, like Claudia said, without being necessarily too pushy.
Yeah.
Great. For those of you who are just tuning in, this is we're running a workshop on collaborating and networking. It's part of a new series called Building Your Creative Community, which is co-presented by Happy Mag and the City of Sydney. Now we're going to switch it over to meeting and taking a few questions from Josh White, who is the label manager of Third Eye Stimuli. So Third Eye Stimuli are a Sydney-based label. They specialize in a lot of psychedelic rock, garage, and DIY acts. And in the last couple of years, they've released some really great records from East Coast Australian bands such as the Jim Mitchells, Rosa Maria, and Noodle House are some great ones. And they also recently signed their first international act, which is Joe Gapp from New Zealand. And Josh is the label manager there. He helps with recordings, he's an engineer. He helps with releasing music, coordinating with media, planning tours, and heaps more. We're sort of phoning in Josh right now because so much about running an indie label is about building a community and sort of building a bit of name around that label and creating, you know, a space that people are safe in, people are comfortable in, and people want to be a part of. And that's sort of, I do think that Third Eye Stimuli has done that really well. So check them out on Bandcamp for merch records, all of that. And now we're gonna say hi to Josh.
Hey guys.
Hey Josh, thanks heaps for joining us, and let's just jump straight into it. So I wanted to ask, what does networking mean to you as Third Eye Stimuli, and what do you think it means to local labels in general?
To me in Third Eye Stimuli, networking is really just collaborating with the people around you in an authentic way, and getting to know people in your community and finding those like-minded people and seeing how you can really help each other.
Awesome, thanks Josh. And what are the most important aspects of networking for you?
I'd say for me, the most important aspects of networking, there's probably a few, but I would say my foremost would be genuity and getting to know people around you authentically. You know, you go to gigs because you love going to shows, and you meet people in bands and within the music industry because you're really just interested in what they're up to and who they are, and you know, that's how authentic connections come about and good things come from those sort of interactions. And then I guess, you know, really honing in on each other's skill sets and seeing how those can be used to collaborate.
Awesome point, and totally agree on that. I'm sure what a lot of people who are watching wanting to know is, how do you usually meet bands who become part of the label?
Yeah, for Third Eye Stimuli and I guess a lot of labels, you can meet bands in some pretty interesting circumstances, and it's quite funny how you come to meet people. But yeah, for us, I guess we started out as a band ourselves, and at the time we were also seeing a lot of bands around us that we loved, that were kind of in the psych rock kind of sound in Sydney, and a lot of those bands needed support just like us, and so that kind of drove us to want to help people out and help get their music out there so that people can hear it. Yeah, some other interesting ways is like you could get an email from, you know, a band overseas, and it's amazing when you do get an email with some new music that you've never heard before, and it really blows your mind. For us, we've got an artist in New Zealand called Joe Gatt, and we met through email as well, and we were just loving his music, and we organised his whole release over emails, and we were basically his pen pals until he finally came over and we toured him here in Australia in February this year, and that was the first time we'd ever met each other in the flesh or even heard each other's voices before, or so that was really cool. And then I'd say, we've met other bands in a similar way. Sunfruits from Melbourne sent us an email and we loved their stuff, and but then other bands we met at shows like Noodle House, and we started out the label as well with the Jim Mitchells, and that was also really collaborative in the sense that Jim Mitchell came to us and showed us his songs, his demos, and we sort of got on board to help him flesh those out and record them and produce them and stuff, and then we even joined the band ourselves and helped play, and we toured a lot with the Jim Mitchells as well. So yeah, things can come about in a lot of different ways, and it's always a lot of fun.
Awesome. Yeah, and what I really want to know is, in what ways do you think you've successfully created a community around Third Eye Stimuli?
Yeah, obviously community is really important to us, and we're always looking for new ways to engage the community and to also cultivate it and help create something new for people to get involved in. For us, I think shows are really important because we're really public facing and we love meeting people and interacting in that way. So yeah, we put on album launches for bands when we're putting out records and help organise their tours. And we generally will go along to the tours because we just love going and hanging out and drinking beers. And then we also put on an annual showcase every year. Well, the last 3 years we've done it for King Street Crawl in Newtown. And that's always massive and a lot of fun. I feel like we meet a whole heap of new people every time that we do it. And you get to book, 8 to 9 bands that we love and people may not have heard, and it's just a lot of fun. But I think overall, like, the way that we've created community is just really just being friends with the people that we meet, and just letting that kind of relationship just organically grow.
Sweet, thanks heaps for that, Josh. And just a final question, something a bit more general. How important is having collaborators to an emerging musician?
Yeah, I think collaborators are super important for emerging musicians, and I think they're still important all the way through your career. I'm sure a lot of pop stars are collaborating, and they're just making a lot more money than emerging artists. But yeah, I think if you're just starting out as a band, for example, you really want to. Hopefully, you've got some friends that are photographers or videographers or graphic designers, or maybe they work in the music industry. Maybe your friend becomes your manager. I know some bands that have friends that have become their managers, and that can be a really great relationship for a lot of bands. Or maybe they help you book your tours or your shows. And yeah, things might sometimes start out where none of you are really making any money, but you do it for the love of it, and you trade with each other in whatever way you can, whether that's just kindness or whatever. And eventually, hopefully you help each other out and you can start to sort of generate some income for each other. And I think most importantly, if you're collaborating with people as a band, say you're working with a photographer or a video maker and they shoot some PR photos for you or a video clip, you want to make sure that you give them a good shout out on socials, or if you have any articles online or anything like that, making sure that they get credited and so people can discover them. And yeah, I think overall it's just about really being supportive of each other and getting ahead.
Awesome, thanks a million for that, Josh. Like I said, that was Joshua White from Third Eye Stimuli. They're a great indie label based in Sydney. Check them out on Bandcamp for merch, to listen to their records and everything else. Cool, thanks Josh. If you're just joining us, we are taking part in the Collaborating and Networking workshop. This is the first workshop in a new series called Building Your Creative Community, which is co-presented by Happy Mag and the City of Sydney. Like I said, if you're just joining us, we are taking questions live. So if you have any questions about anything we've said so far, just drop it into the comments, and Dan, who's writing the answers right now, will get back to you as soon as he can. Cool. Moving on to finding bandmates, which is a bit of a fun one. I'll probably start this by saying if you've been in the music scene for a couple of years, you probably don't need this much of much information here. You probably know where you're going to. You've got go for bandmates or to find new collaborators or that sort of thing. And I think that's largely because there is no right way, I'd say, or perfect way to find bandmates. Like, successful bands have come out of everything from childhood friends to completely cold connections or open auditions. But it all does start with meeting people. So everything we've said before is relevant here. Everyone you meet at a gig, everyone you meet at a music event could potentially be a bandmate. I guess what would be useful for some people to know is what would you necessarily look for in someone that you're potentially going to start a band with?
I guess, obviously they've got to be able to play their instrument. I mean, depending on what genre you're going for. Some punk bands, maybe it's more beneficial if you can't really play your instrument. I know some bands that have started around the idea that people have taken up an instrument they've never played before, which is kind of cool. But aside from that, I think, having a good relationship with someone is really important. Finding people that you gel with, because if all goes to plan, you'll be spending a lot of time together, and long drives down to Melbourne, if you're not with the right people, it can get dark.
Yeah, definitely. Rehearsal studios are a silent place that you're spending several hours with people in a very small room that's probably badly ventilated and doesn't smell that good. So you really do, I think, like having a good connection and having a friendship with that person is almost essential.
Yeah.
Obviously you want to find people you gel with creatively. But sort of just on the point that you were talking about before, if this is your first band and you are younger, maybe you're still in school and maybe you're finding a couple of mates in school, you really do have nothing to lose in your first band. It's a beautiful time to be making music. There is a lot of value in just finding a couple of mates and starting to jam, because I think most people's first band was like that. My first band was definitely like that. I'm going to hazard a guess that yours was probably a bit like that too.
Yeah, definitely.
And learning, and the more time you spend in those early days, rehearsing and finding out what it means to write a song with some other people, or finding what it means to put together a set list for a live show, or even just playing a live show. All of those things are really necessary parts of being an emerging musician. And the more practice you can get in the earlier days, the better. You don't have anything to lose in that starting period, for sure.
Yeah, totally. Like, there's such a learning curve to music, no matter what stage you're at. So never, feel like if you can't play an instrument or can't write a song or any of those self-doubts, like never buy into that, because every step of the way there's new things to learn, and you'll always get better, and you'll be able to look back and be like, wow, now I can do this, and that's really awesome.
Yeah, every good musician started out as a bad musician.
Absolutely.
And the ones that you see on a stage are likely people who've been doing it for 10 years or more, you know? So you got to start somewhere, and I think going to that local circle at the start, people you grew up with, people in your school, people that you go to classes at uni with, or people that you did a workshop with, if you were doing a music workshop, those people they should be the first place you look, because they're people with a shared interest and a shared community with you, and they're, I think, where you should start if this is your first time getting into a band. Something that bears mentioning as well, but is that because you're probably going to be doing things pretty DIY for a while. It's not until later as a band where maybe you have a connection to a label, or you have a manager making some decisions for you. Mates who know a thing or two about design, music production, songwriting, photography, or any other craft will be a really massive help at the start. I think a lot of more bands than people realize have a designer or a photographer in their midst. And that stuff is really helpful, especially at the start, I think. And it'll also tell you a bit about what we're going to get into next, which is working with other creatives and the correct ways to do that. Cool. Any other notes on meeting or finding bandmates?
I don't think so.
Cool. So thanks for tuning in so far. If you're just joining us, this is the Collaborating and Networking Workshop. It's part of the Building Your Creative Community series of workshops. We're doing 4 of these over a month. It's co-presented by Happy Mag and the City of Sydney, and we are answering all your questions live. So if you have any questions about finding a bandmate, working with creatives, anything else we've talked about, just drop it into the comments below and we'll get back to you super soon. So lastly, I want to talk about working with other creatives. As a musician, you are going to be working with other creatives. And when I talk about other creatives, I mean photographers, I mean directors who might do your music video, sound engineers, producers. All of these people, unless you're very, very much a solo operator, which is extremely rare, you are going to work with these people, and they are going to play a really important part in your music career. So I'd say, I think the golden rule, and we touched on it before with sort of that idea of supporting the people who are around you, but the golden rule is that collaboration goes both ways. Thank and credit everybody. It seems like a stupid thing to say, but a lot of the time it isn't done. Say who took your photos, say who directed your video, say who, thank media if you get a write-up. All of that stuff is super important. And you know, the only exception is if you've specifically commissioned something to be uncredited, which does happen, but I generally say supporting those around you will not only help foster that little community that you're building, but it'll encourage more work down the line. So in your bands, did you jump around with people who were doing designs, or did you maybe work with the same photographers over and over again, or a mix?
Mostly I've jumped around, you know, partly because it's different bands and whatever, but partly because, you know, just wanting to try different things, and different releases look different. And that's been really cool. I've had a chance to work with a lot of different people, lots of photographers and videographers and designers and engineers and producers. Yeah, and I think definitely second the crediting thing, that's really important. And also, like, from a monetary perspective, obviously, you know, starting out as a band, or at any point being a band, you don't have heaps of money, and sometimes, you know, paying a lot of money for photos or a video clip, whatever it is, or recordings can seem like, you know, it's, you know, if you're pretty tight, it can be difficult, but I think it's always really important to pay the creatives that you work with properly, because it's their art as well, and you've got to honor that. And also, like, if they feel like they're being appreciated, they're gonna put the most effort in to the job that they can, and everyone's gonna be happy. So I think, yeah, making sure that the people you work with are happy is really important. Yeah. Yeah, other ways that you can show that sort of appreciation is, I know there are very rare cases when, for example, if you have a designer or photographer working from within a band,
that might be a different situation, and there might not be an exchange of cash in that situation because it's part of their project. But there are very rare situations where someone's an old friend, you have a very open relationship with somebody, or in that case, and there might not be an exchange of payment for the work done, but there are many ways that you can make that up to somebody. You know, free tickets to shows, free merch, all of that stuff. I think it's just generally great, and you can do this if you're paying someone as well, of course, but generally you do want to foster appreciation and show that their work is valued, and that is coming back to that golden rule. Everything should be a two-way street, and even though it can feel like with your music, you're very much the center of it, and you're putting the hard yards into it, and you're the face of it. It really is about all the people who you work with, and that's really, really important.
I think collaboration can be a really exciting thing. Like, you never know what someone else's influence is going to bring to it or like inspire in you. So I think, yeah, opening yourself up to outside influence can be really cool. And I think on that point, like, sometimes when you're collaborating with other creatives, like, as you go through the process, you'll hit moments where, you know, you have to refine whatever you're working on, say a design or a video clip, and it might not be going in a direction that you want it to, or, you know, you need to change it. And sometimes that can be hard to approach. But I think one thing that really helps with that is making sure that when you start out with a collaboration, like a video clip or a design or photos, you try and have the clearest idea possible of what you want to achieve. Like, be it like making a document that's, you know, often when I make film clips, I'll write out a document with like images in it that are like reference shots for like how I want it to look, and then like, you know, the themes or like the script or whatever it is. So like, and same with a design or a photo shoot, I'll try and like have a brief that I've written out, and then so that kind of helps with directing it. And then along the way, if you find that you want to change something, like sometimes it can be a difficult conversation to approach, but I think you've just got to try and be as clear as you can and as open as you can, and like, you know, try and just have that conversation with the person. And ultimately, if you're open about what you want, the end result will be you'll both be happy with it. Don't be afraid to like check in during the process, and you know, don't be afraid to make changes and have conversations, because it's definitely like collaborating is a very fluid process, and it's not always going to be like, you know, easy and this is the thing we're doing and now it's done. You know, sometimes you got to make changes, and that's fine. And other times it will be easy and it'll be great. Like, every collaboration is different, and that's awesome.
Yeah, I think treating other creators as you would like to be treated yourself goes without saying, and you should apply the knowledge that you have from being a creative and being a musician to what they're doing. How many times have you changed a song halfway? How many times have you put a finishing touch on something that you never thought you were going to do? Creative work really does take time, and you should respect everyone else's work as much as you would respect your own. So we're just about finishing up. So I think I just wanted to finish on a bit more general points. Now that we've sort of talked about building a local team, finding people who you might necessarily want to make music with, and finding people who are other creatives who help you with that music career that you're embarking on. So a few general points about building your local team. I think it's very important to hold on to your contacts. I think especially if you're doing this for years and years and years, it can be quite difficult to hold on to some people. You might move city, they might move city, but a lot of collaborative work can be done without necessarily living in the same place. And you know, if coronavirus has taught us anything, it's that a lot of stuff can be done remotely. So you never know when you'll want to work with somebody again, need an introduction, any of that stuff. Hold on to your contacts, they're extremely valuable. What else is valuable is the people who you gel with. There are bands who work with the same photographer for years and years. If someone understands your taste and you understand theirs, that's amazing, that's so valuable. And again, hold on to that, foster that relationship. That's something that you shouldn't let go of. And just lastly, I think I'll say it again, be supportive. Music and as we were just talking about, all creative industries can really be tough. It's a slog. Everyone, I think, will agree with that. And having a core group of people that you can rely on for great work, fun and honest feedback will help you immensely. Any closing statements?
Something I meant to mention earlier is from a collaborating perspective of writing music and finding producers and things like that. One really cool initiative that APRA does is this thing called Song Hubs, and I did it a couple of years back, and it's really easy to apply. You just go to their website, and they run a couple a year, and basically it's like this, almost like a camp, and you go there for wherever it is. They do it all around the world, and I actually did it in Toronto because I was over there for Canadian Music Week, but they do them in Australia, and if you apply for them, you know, obviously international isn't going to apply right now. Actually, this might not apply right now because of coronavirus, but in the future, they'll fly you out if you get selected. And it's just a really cool opportunity where you get to, for like 5 or so days, you get to work with a different producer and write a different song each day, write and record a different song. And that was like a really, really incredible experience in my career, a really seminal experience, and it changed, you know, my songwriting a lot, and it was a really great way to network. So I think, you know, once the pandemic is over, that opportunities like that are definitely something to look out for.
Yeah, definitely. Good point. So that concludes the workshop. This has been Collaborating and Networking. It's the first workshop in a series that we're doing with the City of Sydney. This has been Collaborating and Networking. And next week, next Wednesday, tune into the next one. It's going to be on building your own events. So that's sort of looking at how to throw DIY events if you're just getting started, the very basics of approaching venues, and also a bit of a note on online events, because it looks like online events are having a bit of a moment now for obvious reasons, and they'll probably continue to have some relevance even after lockdowns. So tune in to the next one. That's Wednesday, May 27th, same time as this one at 5 p.m. And then there'll be another workshop every week after that for the next 2 weeks. So thanks for tuning in. I'm Tom Cameron.
I'm Claudia Schmidt.
See you next time.
Everything I touch, I turn to gold. Racking up these accolades. I was 12 years old. 12 years old. Even challenging, I do this naturally. So pay close attention, yo, I call this alchemy.